relationship that the United States shares with the people of Israel, the Jewish state, the Jewish nation. It's an important relationship that has been embroiled in American politics since Israel was declared a nation in 1948. The United States has never wavered from its commitment to stand strong with its strongest ally in the Middle East. So tonight we're going to hear from two men who have concerns about the future and the hope of America as well as Israel. And we'll begin tonight talking to Rabbi Yitzhak Adlerstein. Now, he's a senior staff member at the Simon Wiesenthal Center, a Jewish advocacy group and international NGO. He holds the Sidney M. Ermis Adjunct Chair in Jewish Law and Ethics at Loyola Law School in Los Angeles, and he's a frequent spokesperson for Torah, Judaism, in the secular media. And he writes quite a bit for a wide spectrum of Orthodox Jews and the American public. Well, he now resides in Israel. And during my recent trip there, I met with Rabbi Adlerstein at his home in Jerusalem, where we discussed the war, anti-Semitism, Torah, and faith in God. Watch this.
My name is Rabbi Yitzhak Adlerstein. Formerly, I'm the Director of Interfaith Affairs for the Simon Wiesenthal Center, the largest Jewish membership organization, human rights organization in North America. That's only but people are complex. I'm a lot more than that. I am an addict. I am addicted to Torah study, particularly the Talmud. I am an Orthodox rabbi, and I dabble at that too. I've written, I lecture, I write, publish, do podcasts, all that kind of stuff. And in seventh heaven since moving to Jerusalem, which is far better than anything I could ever have imagined. Feeling that I have come home. Culturally, I am American and will always remain American. So we still do July 4th.
If I'm not mistaken, native New Yorker, right?
Native New Yorker, but God had compassion upon me. And after about 2 decades of that, he set me free and sent me to the other side of the country, to Los Angeles, which at the time was a beautiful, beautiful city, and remained so for the almost 39 years that we lived there, until new winds started blowing in and it became less desirable a place to live.
Rabbi, you've had quite a career, and it's far from over. You feel called to do this. It's not just something that you said, I think I want to be a rabbi and I want to do this and that. You actually feel a calling from God to be a servant to people everywhere. Is that right?
That's right, but I take that as something that just comes with the turf if you're a believer in God. I mean, how do you stand in God's presence and not ask yourself, so he's God, not man. He doesn't make any mistakes. What does he want from me? It's not random. So there besides purpose of life and all those things that we find wonderful messages within religion, but every person has to ask the question. God made an investment in me. And investors don't like you coming back at the end of the fiscal year and say, well, I didn't lose too much money this year. Hey, that's not why I made the investment. So that has nothing to do with being a rabbi. I think every true believer in God has to see himself or herself is on a mission. The mission is sometimes hard to find. But if you pray and you're looking for it sincerely, God will direct you to where you can find the fulfillment of that mission. Doesn't mean you have to win a Nobel Prize or become president of the United States. Those are no more valuable in God's eyes than being a good parent and being a good neighbor and trying to make the world a better world.
Yeah, I once heard that leadership is not about titles. It is not about position, but it's about how you utilize the influence that God has given you. How do you use your servant leadership here in Israel at a time of war with Hamas, which has made it its purpose to eradicate Jews, and let's be clear, also Christians?
Hey, that's an interesting question. It starts with just trying to reconstruct your world. For many people, October 8th was much more of a surprise than October 7th. For all of its horror, the fact that on October 8th you could have marches, demonstrations around the world before there had been any kind of military move on the part of Israel that was still another couple of weeks away. But you had everybody identifying with Hamas. This is a wonderful day. The resistance is finally. And people who couldn't find Israel on the map, knew nothing about history, nothing about context, were rallying around the flag, but it was the wrong flag. So people had their worlds destroyed. I didn't. The country of Israel didn't. Certainly Orthodox Jews didn't, because we've been living with anti-Semitism for a couple of thousand years. My mother was a Holocaust survivor. She did time in a concentration camp, part of the first deportation from Germany. We grow up with all of the prognostications in the Bible of what happens when God decides that you don't deserve at the moment my protection. He always comes around and saves us in the end, because that's the other part of the Bible. That's one of the most important things for people to realize about the Judeo-Christian legacy. God makes promises and he doesn't break them.
Rabbi Yitzhak Adlerstein at his home in Jerusalem. When America's Hope returns, we'll continue my conversation with him. That's next.
When I started My Pillow, it was just a problem solution, one product company. Well, since then, with the help of my dedicated employees, we now have hundreds of products, some you might not even know about. To get the word out, we're having a $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use My Pillows, $25. My Pillow sandals, $25. And for the first time ever, our 6-pack towel sets, you guessed it, just $25. Our brand new 4-pack dish towels, $25. And I've never done this before. Premium My Pillows with all new Giza fabric, any size, any loft level, even king size for only $25. And there's so much more. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code for our $25 extravaganza. Order $75 and over. Your entire order ships absolutely free.
We are only 80 years removed from countries that killed 60 to 70 million people intentionally. And we have people being like, oh, it can't happen here. Yeah, it can. And it might.
These people, they're not interested in the facts. They're not interested in anything except crushing people that are in their way.
There needs to be a formal deprogramming of the cult members.
A strong church can stop this.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see.
Lord Heavenly Father, I pray to you today to guide us tomorrow. Give us strength as we face death. Help us not to be afraid, as we know that we are going to be coming to your kingdom.
Back to America's Hope. We continue now with my interview with Rabbi Yitzhak Adlerstein in Jerusalem. being American, you recall 9/11, and people were united, standing together, even though they had been fractured prior to that. They waved the American flag, they sang God Bless America, and they stood in solidarity to vanquish a radical Islamic group, Al Qaeda, that had come to destroy the symbols of America and life as we knew it. We saw people stand together then, and you prayed, I prayed that this unity would stand. Over the years, it has devolved into bitter partisanship, racial division, divisions along the lines of faith. Can Israel hold the line to its moral clarity and its faith in God to right the wrongs of its own past, and then let the world know that Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS, Al Qaeda, Iran, Russia, China cannot succeed in diminishing and deteriorating and devastating Jewish people living in the Promised Land?
It's a tall order, but I'm very optimistic that we can. I mean, people have to be open to doing some reverse engineering and ask themselves why, with all the similarities between the divisiveness in Israel and the United States, why Israel is going to emerge from this as a stronger country. Why they were able to marshal all of the help internally and externally, and trying to learn some of the lessons. Some of them are not easy pills to swallow. Americans have become soft, and people have stopped doing deep critical thinking. Israel's different, precisely because we've been a bastion state, surrounded by enemies since the first day, and the existential threats have never gone away.
That's a human quality that says, I'm going to love and pray for my enemies and extend an olive branch or a helping hand. And yet, the people that they helped turned around and killed, murdered, butchered with savagery. How do you find healing from there?
You find it, I think, in two places. One is the knowledge that this is part of the fabric of humanity. This is working in a space that God left for us. God did not create us as angels. God does not make us robots. God created a world in which we have free will. As long as there is free will, there is the capacity among people to use it in the worst possible manner. But the other side of that coin is that God made a promise, not to the Jewish people, with humanity, that there would be a time of redemption. This is no fairy tale, la la land. God's commitments you can take to the bank. I used to have fun when I was speaking in Christian schools, and did my pitch, and I said, "But we're different here, right? This is part of what we know together. As bad as some of the things in the world around us, we have hope for the future. We can be optimistic. We can pray and hope that there'll be another day, right?" And they say, "Yeah." And I say, "Wrong. We don't hope for it. We know it to be true." Wow. A commitment to God is a reality. It's going to happen. theologically, there is no shortage of white space between Judaism and Christianity. No question about that. So people can change. There is no a priori reason why Palestinians can't do what most Israeli Arabs did. You know, Tosafi was so afraid. What if the Israeli Arabs now join and start an internal front? But they didn't. First of all, they all knew that Hamas had killed Arabs as well. They killed regular Israeli Arabs. They killed Druze. They killed Bedouins. So that changed things a little bit. Israeli Arabs see themselves as an embattled minority, for good reason, who fight for more government aid, like we all do in democratic societies. But they don't want to live under Hamas. If the hatred, I don't believe that the current generation of Palestinians is going to turn their backs. If they still have an 85% approval, Hamas still has an 85% approval rating in Gaza, which has been, so thoroughly destroyed. Okay, good, but we got the Jews. But that's not necessarily the case with their kids. Yes, UNRWA has to go. UNRWA is horrible and has to go. And if some of our friends that have been produced through the Abraham Accords stick with us to make a new Middle East, they can speak to their Arab brethren and bring about a better day. Of course, it's not going to be perfect until Messiah comes. I still pray for him 3 times a day, minimally. I don't think any other solution is going to be half as good. When the world says we want an unconditional ceasefire, what they're really saying is you're keeping Hamas alive and you'll just have to die more because they're going to kill you. They pledged it. There's no reason not to believe them. So you keep dying because we don't like the images that we see on TV. And this is sort of the most frustrating thing to us. You see the images. Why aren't you demonstrating in world capitals for Hamas to accept a ceasefire, for Hamas to lay down their eyes, lay down their arms, and return the hostages, and there'll be a ceasefire
and leave
and withdrawal
and leave.
Why is all of the criticism directed
back where they came from
at the Jewish state and the Jews? And the answer is it's anti-Semitism. It's anti-Semitism. It's not concern for all of those horrible images. Just a few years ago, Assad in Syria killed between 400,000 and 600,000 of his own citizens. Where were the demonstrations? It wasn't like it was hidden someplace. Look at Tibet. Most people couldn't place it on the map, but talk about repression, genocide, cultural genocide. But nobody wants to touch China, not because they're afraid of China, but because, we want cheap stuff at Walmart. We're not going to give that up. What happened to principle and sincerity?
So then why does it come to Israel and it's a different story?
Why exactly? Why? So, there are 2 reasons. The most important reason is that there's a lot more anti-Semitism out there than people want to think. Some of it is conscious, but the more dangerous kind of anti-Semitism is unconscious.
So, just for the sake of definition, for people watching this who may not understand what anti-Semitism is, your work with the Simon Wiesenthal Center, which has exposed it so well and documented it so well and trying to stop it and prevent it and to educate people about it, define anti-Semitism for the young person or older person who has no clue what we're talking about.
Right, so Nathan Sharansky, who had a personal experience with decades of anti-Semitism in the former Soviet Union, his story is really miraculous and now has been here, thank God, for a couple of decades. He wrote about 3 Ds. which could be like a litmus test for seeing whether something is anti-Semitic or whether it's political difference. He said the three are demonizing, when people say Jews are Nazis, or that Jews are committing genocide. If Jews wanted to commit genocide after October 7th, it would have taken them 4 hours if they were sloppy to turn Gaza into a parking lot and buried everybody. 6 months later, and even if you were to accept the inflated figures of Hamas and their health ministry, they can't tell you where any of the hostages are, but they know exactly how many people have been killed. And people have done statistical analyses of their day-by-day reports and shown that it follows a predetermined curve rather than shows any of the randomness that you'd expect.
Yeah.
So that's demonization. Double standard when you expect Jews to act in a different way than anybody else would. When you expect Jews to act in a different way that you would yourself. There's no country currently fielding protests against Israel that would sit back with as much restraint as Israel has over the years and taken the kind of steps that Israel did to minimize casualties, even at the expense of the lives of their own soldiers. Yes, war is ugly, but understand that wars have causes. By placing the blame on Israel rather than on Hamas where it belongs, you're essentially showing your true colors. And the last one is legitimizing. These other countries have to defend or apologize for actions. Israel is called upon to apologize or defend its existence. That Israel is the bastard son of Western colonialism. Israel was formed at exactly the same moment as Syria, as Lebanon, but Saudi Arabia. Let's not allow facts to get in the way of our preferences. To make Jews legitimize their own existence or the existence of their state is another hallmark of anti-Semitism.
So let me ask you then, when you look at the landscape of America, Europe, and your home Israel, what is your hope for Israel and America, and for that matter, where we currently are, the Middle East?
The last one's the easiest. The hope for the Middle East is still, I think, the Abraham Accords. That because of the weakness of the United States since the time pretty much of Barack Obama, countries have realized that they have to fend for themselves in their new alliances. Some of those alliances are very healthy. The news in the last couple of days is that Erdogan is in trouble. Lost big. Next year, he may lose bigger. Turkey was a modern secular state. Secular doesn't mean that people were atheists. They weren't atheists, but they practiced a form of Islam that was more tolerant. There can be, and I hope there will be, a realignment of forces in the Middle East. Once you get down to free trade and people visiting each other, which is already the case between Israel and a number of Arab states, it's very, very hard to turn back the clock. So that gives some hope. As far as Israel and the United States, those are tougher nuts to swallow. I wish we had more time to just point out just how much Israel and the United States have in common. How many of the problems are shared in common. The fracturing of Israeli society to me is more evident than United States society. The difference between blue states and red states, the devolution of rhetoric, the way people speak to each other.
Devolution.
There are problems here, they're greater problems in America. Naivete. Huge problem in America. Extremism, people following the wrong leaders. We have very, very, very few people in the political system who are worthwhile emulating or looking up to. but at least we don't pin our lives on a career profession that didn't exist 30 years ago. Influencer. I remember reading about someone describing one of the Kardashians. Asked, so, like, why is she famous? And said, she's famous for being famous. Those are influencers today. That's who our kids are looking up to. Celebrities, sports. It's so sad to watch that. In Israel, we still do have people. If not politicians, we have other people to emulate. The people we should be emulating are more like the story you told me before we recorded about your mother. Those kinds of stories, those are the heroes that can make America whole again. It won't happen without God. God will survive. Mm. Yeah. But our job is to make consciousness of God much more part of everyday life, and without the extremism. We have to monitor that, make sure it doesn't degenerate. But that's not where the majority of Americans are going to go, the majority of religious Americans. But it's so easy to lose that religious fervor. God is not part of the life of most Americans, even among people who believe. There used to be a Sabbath for Christians. It was, God's day. And businesses were closed and people spent time with their families. Less than 50% of American children have two parents in their home. Less than 50%. That's something that hopefully people will look at Israel and see that the strength of this country is due to the strength of the family.
The fathers are at home.
And
the mothers.
Yeah. I would add one thing to that.
Absolutely.
Social psychologists have pointed this out, that the ideas that motivate, the cement that produces social cohesion is community. Mm-hmm. And that can't mean 100 million people. That's not a community. That's just too big for there to be a sense of community. We have community here in this country because it's small enough, and we have smaller communities within it. The only place that I've seen in America lately where there is community is in churches. And it's a small minority of them. I know a few church planters, and I've seen their success. And a lot of it is built on the fact that they're not just wonderful preachers and everybody comes once a week to listen to them, but they build community during the week. And that is so important. It's been shown that all the things that people normally find degrading, racial differences, ethnic differences, you can create sense of community in smaller groups. We've done a pretty good job of that here in this country. And there's no a priori reason why you can't do it in the United States.
And the Simon Wiesenthal Center, of course, is there to help people understand how they can have that interfaith connection, but also to recognize the signs of anti-Semitism and how to address it and how to end it. We still have a lot of work to do, don't we?
We do. With God's help, we'll do it.
Rabbi, thank you.
Thank you.
My thanks to Rabbi Adlerstein for talking to us at his home in Jerusalem. When we return, we'll talk to Carl Sabo, a man who's quite concerned about the future and hope of America's relationship with Israel. That's next on America's Hope.